The budget speech may not have been the most exciting ever, but it was possibly the most future-focused, zooming in on measures relating to first-time homebuyers, the technology sector and electric cars. But in contrast, there was no mention of pensioners, and little to appeal directly to that particular demographic, and it perhaps marks a new era of more youth-friendly budgets. Whilst there was a big focus on what the Chancellor said on the floor of the Commons, as always it's what's buried in the spreadsheets accompanying the budget document is much more significant. Here are some of key things to be aware of. Growth downgrades. As expected, the economic growth forecasts have been revised down. Indeed, this is the first time that the annual rate of growth for the entire forecast period has been below 2%. The economy is set to slow this year, next year, and in 2019, before a modest pickup in growth thereafter. Northern Ireland has underperformed against the UK since 2008, and this is not expected to change in the years ahead. Productivity problems. The Chancellor placed a heavy emphasis on the future, but the future of the economy and the public finances are dependent on productivity. Over the last decade, the UK's productivity output per person per hour has only improved by 1%. It seems that we have been working harder, but not smarter. This lack of significant productivity improvement affects growth, earnings and therefore government revenue and the public finances. More borrowing before the budget. Philip Hammond was already in a fiscal straitjacket, but the straps have been further tightened due to the downgrade in the economic forecasts. The revision in the latter translates to £90 billion of additional borrowing between this year and 202,122. However, offsets elsewhere mean relative to March the Chancellor is borrowing an extra £44 billion between the last fiscal year and 202,122. An additional £26 billion is now penciled in for the following year. As a result, there will be an extra £70 billion of borrowing. More spending. Given the fragile nature of UK politics, the Chancellor resisted introducing unpopular tax rises. Instead, he has embarked on more spending and overall he eased the tax burden in a number of targeted areas. The three key areas attracting more spend are Brexit preparations, the NHS and housing. The former is to receive an extra £3 billion over the next 2 years. The NHS will get over £6 billion in new funding, and it was stated that additional money would be made available for an NHS pay deal. Help to Build. There was a headline £44 billion for housing over the next 5 years, but this was made of loans and guarantees rather than £44 billion of actual spend. There was actually only £15 billion of new financial support aimed at building 300,000 new homes per year, a figure not achieved since 1970. As part of the charm offensive for the younger generation, which included a discounted rail card for those aged 2,630, stamp duty was abolished for first-time buyers up to a property value of £300,000. 80% of people in the UK will now pay no stamp duty. Northern Ireland, the figure will be considerably higher, and indeed first-time buyers here would have been exempt anyway given that the threshold was £125,000. Duty-frees and other gains. The Chancellor is conscious of the cost of living squeeze affecting UK households. He sought to ease the burden by freezing a range of duties. This included fuel and alcohol duty freezes. Air passenger duty is also to be frozen for long-haul flights. There are also changes around the edges to universal credit to the benefit of claimants. And the national living wage will increase by 4.4% next April above inflation. The income tax personal allowance thresholds were also increased in line with inflation from next April. Northern Ireland more prominent. It is perhaps unsurprising that Northern Ireland got more of a mention in this budget than last. This included the additional £650 million for an executive to spend, though this still means that Northern Ireland's budget will continue falling in real terms. We also heard the Chancellor refer to a city deal for Belfast. The Chancellor joked with the Prime Minister about cough sweets in reference to her infamous conference speech. But what was clear from this budget was that the public finances remain no laughing matter, and productivity looks set to continue to act as a choke on the recovery. Back to the future, austerity and Brexit beckon. Richard Ramsey is chief economist of Ulster Bank in Northern Ireland.